Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about what's happening in the city.
Starting this weekend, the Milwaukee County Transit System will shorten some routes at the edges of its ridership area. Riders will also need to wait longer for their buses at some stops. That's because the Milwaukee County Transit System reduced service to some routes to help deal with a $14 million budget deficit. You may remember that bus fares went up by 75 cents at the beginning of this year. To learn about these most recent changes, WUWM's Katherine Kokal is joined by Jesus Ochoa, the system's Director of Service Development.
Okay, so we're here in March. You and I spoke a couple of weeks ago regarding the first phase of changes to the Milwaukee County Transit System, and now we're coming up on phase 2. Can you explain for people who may not be familiar what changes are going to go into effect this weekend, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So this weekend, we will be rolling out our second phase of changes as part of our 2026 budget. There will be 5 routes that will be shortened on one end with a few frequency reductions in the schedule starting this weekend.
Excellent. And I'm looking at a map of the segments of the routes that are going to be eliminated. And it's kind of like if you put a circle over Milwaukee where downtown is the center, it's kind of like around that very edge of the circle. Can you explain why those segments are being targeted for elimination?
Yeah. So as part of this overall plan, we looked at areas that had a lower ridership historically, areas that are predominantly kind of on the fringes of their routes to ensure that we're preserving as much of that service where people are riding most. So yeah, you'll see that, on some of the routes like Route 11 west of 92nd Street, on our Route 80 north of kind of like Florist. And then we have a few routes that are still kind of in the core, like a Route 22 that will end at Locust and Humboldt. However, there are some routes in the vicinity that riders can take advantage of.
So we kind of know where these route segments are, but I'm wondering how you actually choose them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when making these difficult decisions, we have to look at a lot of the data that we have. So we have a lot of ridership data and trends over time by bus stop, by trip. That we can narrow down and say when are our buses full, when are maybe they less full. But we also have a lot of demographic data that we use and analyze at a very granular level to really pair with that ridership data. Anything from zero-car households to population, job density. You can even break down those population densities by subtypes, right? So you have persons with disabilities, perhaps seniors, youth. We use all that information to ensure that when making these difficult decisions, we're impacting the least amount of people. We never want to, impact our riders, but when we're making these decisions, we have to really ensure that we're serving as many people as possible, and also looking at options that may be in the area. So if there's duplicative service, or maybe there's a route that's nearby that can get riders to a similar destination, those are the types of things that really went into this to ensure that we're doing this as equitably as possible.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're looking not only at how many people are using this segment of a route, but like what the conditions are around the route and what types of access people have to transportation around the area that's going to be affected, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. We want to ensure that, we're looking at access to bus stops, right? So in our industry, about 1/4 mile of a bus stop is what most people are willing to walk. Some of us can walk a little further and some of us can walk a little less. So really using that demographic data ensure that perhaps a senior that may not be able to walk as far as someone that might be a little younger. So we look at all that information to really help us paint the picture of ensuring that we're serving as many of our community as possible. And when we're making these difficult decisions, we want to minimize that impact as much as possible.
When we spoke in January, we talked a little bit about the reason for these changes, and bus riders will know that the base fare has also increased this year. It's probably a little too early to see any major data in ridership changes, but These changes are as a result of a $14 million gap in the county transit system's budget. And our county transit system is unique in the sense that it doesn't have a dedicated funding source. And so I know you specialize in routes for this system. How do you continue to serve people while you're also dealing with budget gaps? Obviously, the ideal situation in transit is that buses come quickly and they are regularly available.
Absolutely, yeah. And frequency is we know that the more frequent route is, the more likely riders are going to ride it. So for us, we want to preserve as much of that network as possible. We all have different starting points and ending points. So whenever we're planning for situations like this, we want to ensure that we're looking at it in a way that we're minimizing the impact to our riders and looking for areas where perhaps there's duplicative service or service nearby that can get a rider in close proximity to what could be reduced or eliminated in this case.
I also had a question about the frequency with which buses are coming to stops. So in addition to some of these changes that are taking place in segment elimination kind of at the edge of the routes, people are also going to have to wait longer for their buses. Can you run through a few of those changes and when people can expect to see them?
Definitely. And that's a big part of this as well. And a big reason why we wanted to start some of these changes in March instead of January, to give riders a little bit more time to adjust to their new schedule, adjust to perhaps a new route that they may need to take to get to their destination. So for many of these routes, there'll also be a frequency adjustment. So your trip may come at a certain time today. You may have to wait a little longer, or your trip may require a transfer. So in the case of some of these routes, like Route 22, for instance, that goes to UWM, we were intentional about ensuring that the connection with our Route 66, which is a little bit more frequent than the Route 22, happens in an area that riders can connect to just to get to UWM. So I would implore that our riders go on our website, take a look at the new schedule, use the real-time information on the apps to do a little bit of trip planning as part of their upcoming, the rest of their semester, if you will, since these changes are happening in the middle of March.
Absolutely. When I look on MCTS's website, you can see detailed information on the website, which is ridemcts.com. There is detailed information about these changes. And then when you scroll to the bottom, it says summer changes 2026, fall changes 2026, winter changes 2026. And all of those areas just say TBD. Do you expect that there will be significant changes to our transit system coming up later this year?
So as part of all these changes that are happening, my team is taking a look at, how are these impacting our riders, right? We're hearing from riders now, we're hearing from riders from the January changes. So as more data comes in, we'll be looking to see where can we make changes within our budget. Although it is TBD right now, our team is working diligently to see where we can make improvements within our means.
And I will mention that although there are potential changes to routes and schedules coming up later this year, TBD, as you say, the system has confirmed that there will not be another change in fares this year. That's my understanding, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Well, the little piece of bright side news is that there were 25 new bus shelters that were kind of plopped all over the map throughout the winter season. Are there any other good pieces of news that you'd like to share?
Yeah, definitely the 25 shelters. If you see them, we haven't had shelters in a while, so we're really excited. They have our logo on there. There's a nice little blue awning on these, and they're distributed across the county. High ridership areas where there's lots of transfers, lots of activity. So you may see a few out there and say, "Oh, that looks new." Well, it is. It's brand new for us, and we're also very excited about our new bus signs. So we call them internally blades, but they are the signs that have the routes on them. What you'll notice about those is that they are branded similarly to our new bus colors, but you can also see them at night, which was a key part for our bus drivers to really be able to visually see them, especially when we have snow in Wisconsin. Sometimes our old bus signs could get covered with snow, making them not legible. The ID on those new signs is very large, and then we have a QR code as well on those signs. So we're really excited about both of those infrastructure pieces.
Okay, I've actually noticed a few of those signs in my neighborhood, and I know I'm a bus nerd, and I get that, but I was walking the dog, and I was like, wow, that bus sign looks really nice. So at least one person has taken notice of the new bus signs.
Awesome. No, we're really happy about them, and you'll be seeing more of the old ones being phased out over the course of this year.
Well, exciting news. So there are always silver linings in the world of transit. Well, thanks so much for speaking with me about this today. It's really important information. I will take this moment to say that updated route information is available on WUWM's website, that's WUWM.com, as well as the transit system's website, that is ridemcts.com. Thanks so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
That was Jesus Ochoa of the Milwaukee County Transit System speaking with WUWM's Katherine Kokal. Milwaukee County Transit is a financial supporter of WUWM.
That was the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast. It comes from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Lake Effect is WUWM's talk show all about what's happening in the city. If you want to hear more conversations like this, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast, and you'll hear highlights from the show. If you want to hear the full show, it's on the radio at noon, Monday through Friday, on 89.7